G'day, Nigel Moore from the Tech Tribe here, and as you can probably tell from the accent, also from Australia. So I've stolen the microphone from my good friend Richard Tubb and taken over the beginning and end of his podcast to blatantly promote our Tech Tribe. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you to death with endless details on the features of our product or the technical mumbo jumbo or how long I've been in the industry or blah, blah, blah. Instead, I'll offer you a quick bribe. If you hang around until the end of the episode, which knowing Richard is no doubt going to be a cracker, then I'll let you know some stuff about our tribe and I'll give you some details on a special Tub Talk only deal complete with steak knives. Well, maybe not the snake knives, but for now, enjoy the heck out of the episode and I'll be back at the end.
You're listening to Tub Talk, the podcast for IT business owners with our featured conversation with Richard Tubb and author and speaker Bob Burg. My name is Jeff Nicholson, and this podcast is all about helping you grow your IT business. In this episode, Richard talks with Bob Burg, Hall of Fame keynote speaker and best-selling co-author of the Go-Giver series. For the past 25 years, he's been helping people to shift their focus from getting to and consistently giving value to others. What you'll hear, the philosophy of the Go-Giver, Bob's new book, the Go-Giver Influencer, his advice on saying no gracefully, and how to deal with difficult situations. This episode was recorded between Richard at home in Newcastle upon Tyne and Bob in Jupiter, Florida. And now, without further ado, here's Richard Tubb talking with Bob Burg.
Hi folks, Richard Tubb here, and I'm joined today by one of my all-time business heroes. I'm so excited for this. Bob Burg is a Hall of Fame keynote speaker and the best-selling co-author of the book, The Go-Giver, now a series of successful books. The message of The Go-Giver is shifting your focus from getting to giving, constantly and consistently providing value to others. Now, when I read the book many years ago now, it had a life-changing effect on me, and Bob's work has profoundly influenced me both professionally and personally ever since. It's an absolute thrill to have you on the show today. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Well, Richard, thank you. It's been great. I feel like we're longtime friends. We've known each other for so long, even though this is the first time we've actually ever, I think, spoken in person. Exactly.
Yeah. We were talking just before we came on air. I think the first time I ever saw you speak was I used to be part of the peer group called HTG, and Arlen Sorensen, a great mutual friend of both of ours, and Arlen introduced me to your work, and it's had such an impact ever since. Thanks for joining me today. So, Bob, you and the Go-Giver philosophy are, if not the biggest influence on my personal and professional life, certainly one of the most major influences. And I, in turn, have shared your teachings with clients, friends, family. Frankly, Bob, I'll be honest, anybody who will listen.
Wow.
For anybody who isn't aware, though, of the Go-Giver book and the Go-Giver philosophy, how would you describe it to them?
Yeah, well, the book itself is in 3 of the 4 books in the series are parables, co-authored with John David Mann, who's just a fantastic writer and storyteller. I'm much more of a how-to guy. Fortunately, John is a magnificent storyteller, which makes the books interesting. But the basic premise, Richard, is really nothing more than that shifting one's focus, and this is really what's so key, shifting one's focus from getting to giving. Giving in this context, simply meaning constantly and consistently providing value to others, is not only a pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. So it's not just a feel-good, nicey nice theory. It's very practical for the simple reason that, human nature dictates that no one's going to buy from you or do business with you because you have a quota to meet, or because you need the money, or even because you really believe in your product or service and so forth. No, they're going to buy from you. They're going to do business with you. They're going to want to be a part of your life because they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. What this does is it creates the context that the entrepreneur, the salesperson, what have you, has got to put their focus on the right place, and that is serving the other person. Because when we do this, and we do this genuinely and authentically, with a desire to bring them immense value far above what we're even charging, now this person feels great about us. They know us, they like us, they trust us, they want to do business with us. And that's why we say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder to value's lightning, which means the value must come first. That's the focus. And then the money you receive is a very direct and natural result of the value you provide.
Now, as I said, the Go-Giver philosophy, and I'm going to call it philosophy because this is not a tool, this is not a tactic, is it, that we use to get something? This is a philosophy, right. I would say. Would you agree with that? Or yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So the Go-Giver philosophy, it's you've just done a very good job of explaining it. But when I talk to people in business about this, they say that sounds well and good, but I hear phrases such as nice guys finish last and, business is a dog-eat-dog industry and so on and so forth. How would you explain the impact you've seen for business owners who have implemented the Go-Giver philosophy?
Sure. Well, there's nothing about being a go-giver that says that one should ever be anybody's doormat or be a martyr or be self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not. If you're, doing things so that if you find yourself constantly being taken advantage of, it's not because you're nice or because you're a go-giver. It's because you're doing things in such a way that you allow yourself to be taken advantage of. So when you think about it, and it kind of goes back to that question, well, that's not, again, that's nice in theory, focus on them, but I need the money now and business is about, well, do people want to do business with people who they think are going to cut their throat? Do people want to do business with people who are only focused on getting their money as opposed to providing value? So no, in a free market-based environment and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. Okay. The only way you can do well in business is through serving others. Otherwise, why would they do business with you? So just on a logical sense, it makes sense to focus on the other person. Profit is simply a reward for serving another human being. What is selling? Selling is discovering what the other person wants, needs, and desires and helping them to get it. So when people say things like business is dog eat dog, well, is it sometimes? Sure. But you either don't do business with those people, you don't involve yourself, or you maintain your ethics and you maintain your way of doing things, certainly without putting yourself out to in any way be taken advantage of. So no, that's in the movies and on television and in the media, that's where there's all the stories about the people who do these bad things. And here's why, Richard, because here's what doesn't sell. Corporate CEO treats people well. Business makes lots of money by serving lots of people really well, right? You look at people like who's the person? I'm trying to think of her name. Sarah Blakely, I think, the inventor of Spanx, who saw a need in the marketplace, okay, and she invented a way to fulfill this need, and she became one of the youngest self-made billionaires we've ever had. Was she being dog eat dog, ruthless? No, she was finding a way to bring value to the marketplace.
Absolutely. And I watch television shows. Here in the UK, we have shows like Dragon's Den, I guess you would call it the Shark Tank. Right. In America, very, very similar. And we have shows like The Apprentice. And I think it cultivates this image, doesn't it, that business is all about being cutthroat and getting ahead of that. That has, in my experience, has not been the case at all.
No, and and again, it's a big world. It's not that there aren't people who do business that way, but they tend to have to work a whole lot. You have to work a whole lot harder to make a lot of money when people don't know you and when people don't like you and when people don't trust you.
Yeah.
If you really want to do well, find a way to serve a lot of people and serve them well.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Your latest book is The Go-Giver Influencer. I read it in a single sitting, Bob. I absolutely loved it. I know you and I were talking just before we came on air, and you actually think this is your best and most impactful book to date, I think, and I would absolutely agree with that. So thanks to you and John David Mann for producing another entertaining book full of really thought-provoking wisdom. It's a compelling story about the power of genuine influence in business and well beyond. Just before we jump into it, though, you've touched upon this already. 3 of your books are already out there. The Go-Giver books are parables, sort of business stories. You were a big fan of the parable. Why do you think that speaks to people?
I think stories connect with people. I think stories connect with people on a different level than how to, all my previous books were all how-to books. It was step 1, step 2, step 3. And hey, I'm a lover. I love how-to books. I read them all the time. Okay. But there's something about a parable, a story that's told that just, again, there's a different type of connection. And sometimes you can take some how-to information, and if you put it in the form of a story, people are much more likely to receive it willingly. They're much more likely to take it in. It can sort of, there's an old saying that words that come from the heart connect with the heart. And I think that's what parables do. And I know I myself have always loved reading parables. I've read them throughout the years, and I had thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which was one of my first books, and that was a how-to book. It wasn't how people who are entrepreneurs or who are in sales but never really felt comfortable with sales or with relationship building could learn how to build very strong, sustainable relationships where people felt good about them, where people knew them, liked them, trusted them, wanted to see them succeed. And, if we could take that basic premise and put that into a story, and that's, how we came up with The Go-Giver. And, again, I'm just so thankful for John for, being able to translate that really in such a wonderful way that he did.
Yeah, fantastic books and such easy reads as well, entertaining and, thought-provoking as well. So thanks again. So back to the latest book, The Go-Giver Influencer. Now, you've been quoted as saying you can get the results you want while making the other person feel genuinely good about themselves, about the situation, and about you. And that quote, I think, Bob, actually is at the heart of this book. Feel free to disagree with me if you don't see that as the case. But tell us more about what you mean by that quote. You can get the results you want by making the other person feel genuinely good.
Well, there were really 2 ways to influence someone when you think about it. And so first we have to go back and ask, what does influence really mean? How is it defined? And on a very, very basic level, we could define influence as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. And you could do that through ordering someone, compelling someone, especially if you're the boss, right? If you have a position of power and authority, you could compel them, compliance, right? But do people really respond well to compliance? Now, they might do what they have to do if they're worried about losing their job or something, but they're probably not going to give it their best effort. And they're probably, as soon as you don't have that kind of authority over them, they're going to run, right? And so forth. So that's, one way to do, or through trickery or through manipulation. Again, those are all forms of compliance, and it's what we would call push kind of influence. What we believe influence really is pull. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people first to themselves and then to their ideas. And they do this not through pushing their will on others, pushing their ideas on others, or being pushy, but again, through pull, through attracting others. Now, how do you do this, though? And that's the key. And this goes back now to getting the results you want with everyone feeling great about themselves. Well, the what we would call the genuine influencer, they question themselves, and they question their own motives, making sure their focus is in the right place. They're able to move from an I or me focus to an other focus. So they might ask themselves, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their wants, with their needs, with their desires? How does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it align with their values? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, again, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate or coerce another person into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment rather than trying to depend on some type of compliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that that story plays itself out in the Go Giver Influence, and I don't want to spoil it for any of the listeners here because I want them to go out and get the book. It's a fantastic read. You know, as I said earlier, I sat down and read it. It took me about 2 hours to sit and read it with a nice hot pot of green tea. So,
thank you.
So, one of the lessons that you share, or one of the teachings that you share within the book, one of the secrets really to genuine influence is to master your emotions. Now, this really struck a chord with me. So joining the dots backwards in my own life, I've realized that through raising my own emotional intelligence has been a key to my growth. And again, thank you up front, Bob, because a lot of this that I've learned about mastering my emotions is from your teachings, from your podcasts, from your books, and so on. So thank you for that. In fact, one of your older books, Master Your Traits, Master Yourself, going back quite some time here, aren't we? But 13 Weeks to Creating Success in Business and Life. That really helped me a lot with this. So you really have got this back catalogue of fantastic.
Thank you.
But back to mastering your emotions. How can people master their emotions? And how does this actually help them in real world terms?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's where it all starts, because it's only when we're in control of ourselves, when we're in control of our emotions, that we're even in a position to be able to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved. I think we all intuitively know that. We tend to respect that person who is on top of things and doesn't get easily annoyed, right? And it seems to always be in control of themselves. And yet, how often do we allow ourselves, do we let ourselves, based on someone else, what someone else says or does, we allow them to push our emotional hot buttons, and we cause ourselves to become frustrated or helpless or annoyed or angry, and we say or do something that we know is totally counterproductive to what we should be doing, or to accomplishing what we want. Well, why do we do this? Because we're human beings, and as human beings, we are emotional creatures. We'd like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent, of course, we are, but we're basically emotional creatures. We are emotion driven. We make major decisions based on emotion, and then we back up those emotional decisions with logic. We rationalize, which basically means we tell ourselves rational lies. And we do this to justify that thing we shouldn't have done, which we know well. So how do we work on that? Well, really, once we make the decision that we know that mastering our emotions is going to work for us, is going to be able to help us, we first understand that we're not denying our emotions. We're not foregoing our emotions. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. But we're going to make sure we're controlling them as opposed to they controlling us. Or as one of my great friends, Donji Scumaci, puts it, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car, right? You're at the wheel. Your emotions are in the passenger side, seatbelt fastened. And so safety belt fastened. So one of the things we can do is, if we know there are times where certain either events or people or situations push our buttons, then what we want to do is prepare for that and see that play out in our mind and see how we've handled it before and upset ourselves and how that just doesn't feel very good. Now, play that out again and see that same person saying the same basic thing or the same type of situation. And now what I want you to do is I want you to imagine yourself just handling it beautifully. You respond rather than react. You are in total control of yourself. You're not bothered. You're annoyed. You have a feeling of serenity and peace of mind. You let the person finish saying whatever they say. You don't interrupt them. And then your response is genuine and it's kind and don't worry about the exact words. Those come later. But it's just the seeing yourself handling it like that. And then feel what that feels like. And it's a great feeling. Now what I want you to do is rehearse that and practice it again and again, like an astronaut. Before they go up into space on a mission, they'll do hundreds and hundreds of simulations. Why? So that when they're finally up in space and this thing happens, they've already been there. They've done that. They're prepared for it. They've been through it in their mind. Now, someone might say, well, it's not the exact same, but well, you know what? It's pretty close. And we know that the human mind can't distinguish between what has actually happened and what has been suggested to it. The unconscious, the subconscious can't distinguish between what's happened and what has been suggested to it, over and over again. And so then when this situation comes up again, and as soon as it starts to manifest itself, it's like in your mind, boom, I know this. I've been practicing this. This is fine. I can handle this. And you go through it and you handle it beautifully. And then afterwards, I want you to take great pleasure in how you did that and know two things. One is if you can do it that time, you can theoretically do it every time. But the other thing is you won't do it right every time because you're a human being and I'm a human being and we're still going to mess up from time to time. But I'll tell you what, the difference this makes, and I'm saying within a process of a couple of weeks, you'll see an amazing difference with yourself and other people will see it within you as well. Your influence will be growing. And, it really comes down to this. When you can control your own emotions and help others to work effectively within theirs, now your influence is ready to go sky high.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And that's worked very well for me as I've sort of raised my emotional intelligence over the years. So I'm the same sort of lines, but bear with me on this one, Bob. I'll share with you. At the age of 40, I got married a couple of years ago. And I remember at the time hearing lots of conventional wisdom from very well-meaning people who wanted me and my wife, Claire, to succeed in marriage. They said, marriage is all about compromise. But surprisingly, you say that whether it's a marriage or business or any relationship, compromise is not the right answer. Have I got that right?
Well, there's a time and place for everything, of course. And there are times that compromise is certainly necessary. What we say, though, is we don't want compromise to be the first option or the most desirable option. And here's why. As one of the mentors in the story told the protege, because in this story there were two mentors and two proteges, and one of them said that the word compromise comes from the Latin for nobody actually gets what they want and everyone comes away unhappy. Now, that's not really what it means, the Latin root, but it might as well, because when you think about it, compromise by its very definition is lose-lose. Both people are giving up something they want, okay, in order to kind of get along or go along or keep the peace or whatever. Again, time and place for that. There's no question about it. But lose-lose isn't ever what we really want to go for. Instead, rather than compromise, we say go for collaboration. Collaboration is win-win. Collaboration is both people get what they want because both people are, or at least the one person who takes responsibility for doing so, is discovering what both people want and how both people can get more of what they want. Okay? So, collaboration is 1 + 1 = 3. So again, is there ever a need for compromise? Of course, but it's not the first option. We would say rather than go for compromise or rather than aim for compromise, aim for collaboration.
Understood. Now, there was something else I picked up in the book. You say there's one sentence that's guaranteed to prevent misunderstandings. Come on, Bob, really? Tell me more about this.
Well, again, it's always in context, and this has to do with belief systems, which is a part of stepping into the other person's shoes. Which, stepping into the other person's shoes kind of sounds easy because we hear that all the time, but it's really not necessarily easy because most of us have different size feet. Right. So we can't literally, we can't step into another person's shoes, but figuratively, it means we can't step into another person's mind because we don't know what they're thinking because we come from different belief systems, different ways of life, different perspectives, different paradigms, different ways of seeing the world. So there's a good chance you don't know what that other person's thinking or experiencing, and they don't know what you're thinking. But as human beings, we tend to think that other people see the world basically the same way we do. How could it be any different? It's all we know. So that's why we say that what we need to do to step into another person's shoes is to ask questions and then listen. Listen not just to speak, which a lot of people do, right? That's surface listening. We're listening just to wait our turn to speak and get our point in. Instead of listening with your ears, listen with your eyes, listen with your posture, listen, one of the mentors says, with the back of your neck. In other words, with your entire being. So what does this have to do with that one clarifying question to make sure a misunderstanding doesn't occur? It means that when someone says something, unless you're absolutely sure you know what they mean, and you probably don't, and I don't, and no one does, ask them to clarify. So let me just give you an example. There's a project at work, and there's a team. It's a team of 4 people. And the project manager, the team leader, calls everyone together on Monday morning and says, hey, there's been a change. We need to get the new client's project done as soon as possible. Okay, so let's get started. Boom. Now it's Wednesday afternoon, end of day, calls everyone together. Only one person has their work done for it. What's the matter? I said, as soon as possible. Well, what does that really mean? To one of them, that means drop everything you're doing and get it done. Okay, right now. To another person who came from another team, as soon as possible meant, well, complete what you're doing now first, and then right away get to this next one. To the other person who came from a whole different company on the team he was on, as soon as possible meant nothing. Just give it lip service and then keep doing what you're doing. So you've got 4 different people with 4 different definitions of as soon as possible. So instead, when the team leader said, you need to get your work in as soon as possible, the question that one of the team members could have asked is, Dave or Susan, just for my own clarification, when you say as soon as possible, is there a specific day or time you had in mind? And then the team leader could have said, yes, end of day, Wednesday, 5:00. Now you'd have had one definition and the misunderstanding wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. Now you might say, well, why didn't the team leader just say end of day, Wednesday, 5:00? And my answer is, I don't know. Why don't people communicate what they mean instead of just saying things? We just assume people know what we mean sometimes. I'm as guilty as anyone else. So, you know what I'm saying? So the question is always just to ask the person to clarify, to define their terms. But you do it in a kind, tactful way, not, well, what do you mean by as soon as possible? It's just for my own clarification, or just to make sure we're all on the same wavelength. When you say X, what exactly do you know what I'm saying? And so when you start using that will take care of about 99.9% of the misunderstandings that you ever have.
Yeah, and had a real world scenario with this, Bob, just a few months ago with an IT client of mine. Phoned me up on a Friday afternoon and said, Richard, I'm in a bit of a pickle. Client has said to me, we need this work doing urgently. But I'd already promised my wife and kids that we would go away this weekend to do some, and this was on a Friday afternoon. He said, I feel like I'm in between a rock and a hard place. What should I do? And I said to him, well, what does urgently mean? I said, pick up the phone, go back to the clients and say, just for my own clarification, when you say urgently, what do you mean? And you'll laugh at this, but the answer came back, before the end of the month. Whereas my client was thinking it's got to be done before the end of the day, and I've got to give my weekend up, and I've got to let my
What
wife.
a wonderful explanation. What a wonderful explanation. And that's why so often when people on our team, when we're speaking about something, we talk about what a client has said, not just about time, but about any kind of thing. We always ask, do you know exactly what they meant? And if the answer is no, we either call or email them and ask. You know what I'm saying? But we're often asking, do we know exactly what they mean by that? And that you asked him, you just gave him great advice. What boy, fantastic.
Well, I've learned from the best there, Bob. And something else that I picked up, and I've explained this to other people, but I always get this question, and I'm pretty sure you do too. One of the simplest but biggest pieces of wisdom I've learned from you is the ability to say no to requests in the way that's both kind but effective. For people who are perhaps not familiar with what I mean, can you perhaps share that answer with them? How do you go about saying no?
Sure. Well, we're often asked to do things that for whatever reason we would rather not do or don't feel as though we have the time or energy or inclination or what have you. People say, well, as a go-giver, aren't you supposed to just do everything for everyone? No, of course not. As a go-giver, you're probably going to be very successful. And the more successful you get, the more people are going to ask you to do things. They're going to take time away from doing the things you need to be doing. So no, you need to say no more than you need to say yes, a lot more. But you do it in a way that's kind and tactful and respectful and honors the other person. This can be difficult to do. And saying no can be difficult to do because by and large, we want to please other people, which is fine unless it gets in the way of, doing what we need to be doing and so forth. So through the years, there's been, different ways, different suggestions on how to say no. And one of them's become very, very popular, which I find to be totally counterproductive, is when I hear someone giving the advice, well, no is a complete sentence. Oh my gosh, I cringe when I hear that because it's one of those things, I know what they mean. They mean don't feel like you have to. And of course, absolutely. But there's a difference between not feeling like you have to be self-sacrificial and being rude to someone. So, when I see people and they hear that advice and they nod their heads and I'm like, from now on, I'm just going to say no to really. Is that what you're going to do? Right? Someone asks you to do something like serve on a committee. It's a compliment that they've asked. They obviously think highly enough of you or what have you. And you're just going to say no. You're not going to do that. It's rude. You're going to turn a friend into an enemy and maybe keep that person from ever asking you to do anything with them again. And you might want to keep the door open. But the main reason you're not going to say no like that is because it's incongruent with your value system of treating people with kindness and respect. So I don't think that advice is good advice. Now, another piece of advice I hear people say is, well, just kind of, say, make up a little fib like I don't have time. The challenge with that is a couple-fold. One is, it's not that you don't have time, it's that you don't have the desire to do it. Or you have more desire to keep the time for something else than you do for that. In other words, as human beings, we don't have time for anything. We make time to do those things we value doing, right? Things are a trade-off. And so we know that saying I don't have the time, but then also remember, you're setting yourself up for that person, because they've heard people say I don't have the time and they can answer that. And when they persuasively share with you why time will not be an issue, now you've either got to come clean and admit that, well, it's not really that, I just don't want to do it. Now that person's going to be a little mad, you're going to feel a little embarrassed. Or when you say I don't have the time, they can say, oh, well, you know what? That's fine, but we're going to do it again in 3 months. I'll call you then, okay? Now you've got, right? So I don't think it's productive to do that. So instead, here's a way of saying no that you can use the rest of your life. And it's kind, it's tactful, and everyone will feel good about it. So let's just use the generic example. Someone asks you to serve on a committee that for whatever reason you don't want to do. So what you would say, and there's a couple different ways to solve it, I'll give you my way and then give you a couple suggestions. It simply sounds like this, Richard. Thank you so much. While it's not something I'd like to do, please know how honored I am to be asked. That's it. Okay. So, or it could be, thank you so much for asking. While it's not something I choose to take on, please know I'm just so, very grateful that you would think to ask. However you want to do it that way. But my words are, thank you for asking. While it's not something I'd like to do, please know how honored I am to be asked. What you've done is with kindness and tact, you thank them, you let them know that you were saying no to it, but you also let them know how honored you were to even be thought of and to be, so you honored them. What you didn't do is give them an excuse to hang on to and to be able to come back and answer. And so if you'll just do that, I'm telling you, it will set you free.
Yeah. And there's a bit of follow-up there, isn't there? Because I've shared this with people and they've said, people then come on and go, oh, come on, Bob, come on, just do it.
Yeah. So here's what you do. So they say, oh, come on, we really need it, or it won't take, whatever they say. And what you do is just very patiently, with no defensiveness, okay, just let them, don't interrupt them, just let them finish what they're saying. The only look on your face would be one of kindness or compassion, but not of defensiveness. Wait till they finish and then just say, I appreciate it. I'd rather not. But again, thank you so much. Boom. You just do that and one or two and just stay with it. Okay. And you'll have retrained them that, they can ask you and that's fine. But that when you say no, the answer is no.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, I'm glad you didn't say no to this interview, Bob.
I wouldn't want to say no to this interview.
I am very excited about speaking to you, and I'm not alone. So I shared on social media that you and I were going to have this conversation. We had a flood of lovely responses. You've got a really big following in the IT industry.
Well, thank you.
Speaks well to that industry as well. Some questions that came in, if I may throw them out there. A good friend, Mark Matthews, throws the question out. He says, how do you deal with doing a good turn for others and that good turn not being acknowledged? And the specific example Mark gave was he sent books to people out of kindness and they've never thanked him. How do you reconcile that? How would you deal with that situation?
Sure, and that's a great question from Mark. There's a couple different levels to this. One is, why don't some people say thank you? I don't know. People are people. What we need to do in this case is not be emotionally attached to their saying thank you. And in his tweet, when he wrote the question, he said he was pretty sure he knew the answer to that, and I think he probably knows that is the answer. But
Mark's a big go-giver himself.
Yeah, but sometimes it is difficult because we know we would thank someone. But here's the thing: people don't necessarily do what we do, and they don't necessarily have the same values for certain things. Now, there's also one other aspect I want to talk about, though, in this. Mark might feel he's giving that person great value by sending that person a book, but that person may not see that as being of value, which, by the way, doesn't mean the person still shouldn't say thank you. But because Mark probably loves to read, like I love to read, okay, and you love to read, so we would think giving someone a book, because we tend to give gifts as we would like to receive gifts. There was a great book on that, The 5 Love Languages. You may have read, I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's one of the best books ever written. The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, I think his name is. And it talks about how people receive love and so forth. And again, he's talking more about a family loving relationship, but it goes to anybody. But here's the thing: value is always in the eyes of the beholder. This is key. It's not what we would find valuable. It's not what we think someone else should find valuable. It's what they do. So the best thing for Mark to do is, on an individual basis, find out what that person values and give them that.
And this applies to sales situations. It applies to so many things. We can assume that people find value in something that we value, and that's not the case at all. They see things from their own perspective, don't they?
This is why in the sales process, discovery is the first part. And to me, it's the most important part. And I learned this from one of my mentors, Harry Brown, that, because again, what is sales? Discovering what the other person wants, needs, and desires and helping them to get it. We may find a certain value in our product or service that the other person doesn't see, but they might see something else that we don't see. Again, because we're looking at it from our unique viewpoint, vantage point, not theirs. The key is we've got to discover theirs. Once we know what they want, need, and desire, only then can we match the benefit of our product or service with their want, need, and desire.
Lovely. Another question that came in over social media from Steve McGowan, who is a fantastic go-giver himself, and I would say, I know you're a fan of Dunkin' Donuts, aren't you? And the foods and the coffee that they serve there. Steve owns some burger restaurants that are doing the Beefy Boys that are doing incredible burgers. So if you ever get the opportunity, Bob, check those out. But the question from Steve was, what's the biggest impact you've seen from something you consider to be a really small action? So I think, to paraphrase Steve's question, is perhaps you've done something, a kind turn for somebody, you don't think twice about it, you may not even notice or remember it, but it's had massive ramifications.
Well, I remember, and that's a great question by Steve. I remember, here's what it is, Richard. I think it's just doing what you do because you know it's the right thing to do without attachment to the results, but knowing that if you're doing the right things, the right results are going to happen, not because of any kind of magic or anything, but because of simple cause and effect. When you're constantly providing value to others, again, in a way that they value, you're creating what we call a benevolent context for your success. So in answer to his question, I think of a time, and this is just hit me, that goes back early in my speaking career when I was really getting my feet wet, and I was trying to get, there was a person who I had connected with at the National Speakers Association, who talked on a fascinating subject. He was really a fascinating person. And I remember I used to, when I was writing articles, this is the days before the internet and everything, right? Before, and so you wrote articles for trade publications and magazines as a way of positioning yourself. And I'd write for a lot of these trade professional magazines, but then I'd always think of people who I knew, who I thought could add value to the magazine. And so I'd refer the editor to that person. And I remember with this particular person who I'm talking about, he had written several articles for them and had gotten some business from it. And again, I just did it because I thought it could provide value to him, to the magazine, to the, what have you. And I remember at one point, and it was a couple of years later, I was trying to get into a big organization. And not only could I not get my foot into the door, I couldn't even locate the door. And it came to my attention that he, at one time, they were a big client of his, and I asked him, and I didn't ask him for a referral. I just said to him, could you give me some advice on how I could even know who to contact, and I'll, do the legwork, and he goes, nonsense, I'll have them call you. And the decision maker called me on the phone the next day and said, so-and-so said I needed to call you and have you do some work with us. And that became a hugely lucrative client for me over the next 3 or 4 years.
Oh, I love that. And I've often said it's human nature, isn't it, to want to reciprocate, to look for opportunities to reciprocate there. So give without attachment, and, don't expect things to come back to you, but don't be surprised when they do. And I think that's a great example there. So we're coming to the end of our time together, Bob. There's a couple of things I've got to ask you just before we go. The first, on a personal level, I know you're a big animal lover and a supporter of animal charities as well. Same here. We've got a rescued cat, Tilly, 4 guinea pigs, some zebra danio fish. What does the Burg household look like in terms of furry friends at the moment?
Actually, because I'm still traveling more than I'd like, and I live in a condo area without a big yard, I only have a cat from the shelter. Oh. And so it's just Calvin the cat and me right now. So, but I grew up with dogs and have always had dogs, and just, I love all animals.
Yeah, and I've read about your support for animal charities and things. So thank you for all that you do there. And I should say, animals play a part, don't they, in the Go Giver influence?
Oh, very.
And we won't give that away because it's important for people to read the story. But if you're an animal lover, you'll get a kick out.
John and his wife are also very big animal lovers, and so we really, wanted to make animals and how much we appreciate them and how much value they bring to humanity. We wanted to make that a big part of the book.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you and I have been Twitter friends for many, many years. We've got a number of mutual friends, including Laura Stewart. Listeners should check out Laura's fantastic podcast on leadership.
She's wonderful.
And I mentioned earlier on a great mutual friend and a wonderful influence on my life. He's been on this podcast before, Arlen Sorensen.
Oh, Arlen is truly one of my heroes. He is a magnificent human being.
Yeah, and it was Arlen who introduced me to your work, Bob, many, many years ago. As I said earlier, when you spoke at a HTG event in Dallas, Texas. I know you can remember that one. Now, I can't let you go today without asking you about something that happened there.
Okay.
You got on stage. Well, first of all, unlike a lot of speakers that I know who sort of sweep in, do the presentation and leave immediately, you were there for a good portion of the day, getting to know people, chatting and, sharing your wisdom with them, which was fantastic. You then got on stage and you name checked, I'm going to say a dozen people. It was probably more than that, but not just a dozen people but that you knew, but people you'd met for the very first time that day. Yeah. And then you shared what you'd learned about them. And you said, hey, Richard, lovely to meet you. I hope your wife Claire is good. And Ben Ryan. And this went on. I was absolutely flabbergasted. It felt to me at the time as though you'd remembered absolutely everybody in an audience, and there were some 500 people there. How on earth do you cultivate such an amazing memory?
Like anything else, it's a system, because I at one time had a very untrained memory and I could not remember names for the life of me. And I could tell you some of the embarrassing things that happened as a result, but it's just too embarrassing to even share. And I was at a seminar once because I love going to seminars and learning and studying and learning new things. And there was a guy there who did a memory demonstration. So I bought his, back then it was tapes. This is how long ago it was.
Yes.
And I remember I immersed myself in them, but I just practiced, and it's just a system. And what is a system? A system is simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key is predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you just need to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. So I just learned the system. I learned the memory system that the guy taught, and eventually I started teaching it, and I did that for quite a few years, actually, when I first started speaking, and I wrote a book on it and had CDs on it and different things, but that's not a real big part of what I do, but it was always fun to, I'm not doing that as much anymore because as I get older, it's hard work to, meet an audience and remember people's. So, but what I do is I'll meet the ones that I meet and, refer to them during the program, but I don't have everybody stand up like I used to and go through the audience, it's fun to do. And it really is a confidence builder when you know someone's name, when you remember their name, but it's also very important that when you remember someone's name and you see them, whether it's 30 minutes later or the next day or whatever, that when you call them by name, if you're one-on-one and you see them, that you reintroduce yourself.
Yes.
Okay. So you say, hi, Dave, Bob Burg, we met yesterday at the so-and-so, because you never want to make another person feel badly or feel defensive that they didn't remember your name, which they probably didn't. So you always want to give someone the out or the back door. So when I say Bob Burg, we met, and then they can say, oh, sure, of course, Bob, I know your name, And so again, it's just a matter of, and again, it's another form of influence. Just, I think really what it comes down to, Richard, is 95% of influence is simply how you make people feel about themselves.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. Well, when I first saw you present, it created a great memory for me, Bob. This podcast, you taking time out of your busy day and schedule to come on, has created another great memory for me. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before we go, if anybody wants to continue the conversation with you, I know you're very active on social media. You respond to all the messages you get. I've observed that as well. Or indeed, if anybody wants to seek out the Go-Giver Influencer or any of the Go-Giver books, your podcast, or any of the other great work that you share, how can they go about doing that?
I would just say to go to The Go-Giver without the hyphen, thegogiver.com, and just scroll down the page and you'll see a bunch of goodies. You can read the first couple chapters of most of the books, and the podcast is there, our Facebook Live show, and we have a Go-Giver Entrepreneurs Academy. We usually have a couple people from the UK that seem to come every time. Our next one's in January. And so there's all sorts of resources there for people if they'd like to stop by thegogiver.com. But, it's been really a joy and an honor. And when I say honor, I mean Honour.
Very good, yeah.
UK way. And, last time I spoke in England, I remember I spoke to a few people. I didn't quite get what they said. I'm not sure I speak English. And so, but it was a blast. Lots of wonderful people there. My
Bob,
UK mates.
Your UK mates. You're going to have a lot more UK mates, I would imagine, after this podcast goes out. Bob, thank you. It's been an absolute honour and a privilege. And again, thank you for all the wisdom that you've shared over the years. It's had a profound effect on me personally, as well as professionally. Cannot thank you enough. You're a great man. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Richard.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Tub Talk, the podcast for IT business owners. You can find the show notes and bonus content for this interview, along with dozens of other interviews with IT business leaders over at www.tubblog.co.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd really appreciate you rating and reviewing the show over at iTunes. It helps the show reach new listeners. Tune in for our next episode when Richard speaks to his latest guest for more valuable insight into the world of business and IT. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak with you next episode. Have a great day.
G'day, Nigel Moore from the Tech Tribe here again. Now, I hope you enjoyed the episode and there were some rockin' takeaways to go and implement in your business. You are going to implement them, right? Good. So I promised at the beginning of the episode to give you the super quick pitch on what the Tech Tribe is and why you should come and join us. I created the Tech Tribe because it breaks my tech geek heart when I see good people struggling to run their IT support business, especially because that used to be me. Although the good person part is quite debatable, the struggle part was very real for many years. And in a nutshell, I created the Tech Tribe to help MSPs like myself back then get access to the tools, templates, training, and resources that I wish I had when I was traveling my MSP journey. Plus, it's all backed up with a supportive community and expert coaching from not only me, but from the fearless host of this podcast, Sir Richard Tubb himself, who is one of our tribal elders. Now, instead of me babbling on more about why you should join us, I thought I'd read out 2 quick notes from some of the hundreds of MSPs already inside our tribe. First up, from Tom, great dude from the United States. He says, I've been in Nigel's Tech Tribe for almost a year now. Best investment I've made to date. And secondly, from Chris, one of our Aussie tribers, who says, your energy, tools, techniques, tips, and recommendations have proven invaluable. And whilst I'm not making millions yet, things are on the up and up. Please keep up the good work. So if you want to join the tribe and get access to all of the juicy goodness, simply head on over to thetechtribe.com/tubtalk and check out the super duper special deal for Tub Talk listeners only.
Hey team, this is Richard again. Just one more thing before you take off, and that is MSP Insights. Now, every Tuesday, I share my thoughts on the business of IT with you, the managed service community. Thousands of managed service providers already subscribe to MSP Insights. It's easy to sign up, easy to cancel. MSP Insights is basically a short email from me every Tuesday without fail with advice on growing your IT business, plus cool resources I've found, discovered, or started exploring that week. It's kind of like my diary diary of cool things and often includes articles or books I've read, tools I've discovered, and events I think you'd be interested in, often sent to me by my friends and Tub Talk podcast guests. So, if that sounds fun, a short, tiny bite of MSP goodness every Tuesday, and you'd like to try it out, just go to go.tub.co/Tuesday. That's go.tub.co/Tuesday. Drop in your email and you'll get the very next one. Thanks for listening.